What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. I realized in the last video that I did, I was very bland and kind of had no energy. So I'm ramping it up a little bit today, and hopefully it sounds a little bit better and goes a little bit better. But regardless, today we're gonna be doing a college football playoff bracket. I know we're still pretty early into the season, going into week 8, I believe. Week 7, going into week 7. Actually, week 7 has already kicked off, technically, as Tuesday night FIU and Liberty played. But regardless, those two teams don't matter for this scenario as of right now. But we're going to go straight into it. I already drew up my bracket. However, I'm gonna have a different bracket that'll probably pop up on the screen here and there, so that way you can see what I'm talking about, things like that. But I'm gonna now go through my bracket, and when I come back, I'll have everything done. And yeah, I just wanted to do a quick little intro. So be back in just a second, and when I come back, we'll talk about this college football and break it all down. So be right back. All right, well, I decided to try something different. I'm gonna hold the mic. I don't know if I'm gonna like it more. We're about to figure it out. But I just finished my little bracket. I should have another one coming up here on the side somewhere, or I may just pop it up every once in a while. Not 100% sure what I'm gonna do with it, but you'll see. Um, so starting off, I mean, right now everything is gonna be wild in college football. I mean, just this week alone, Oregon and Ohio State playing number 2 and number 3 teams in the country. So that game is going to shake up everything that I've done on this paper. And that's why I like to do this, I guess, is just put a prediction out there, see if it lands, see if it sticks. If it doesn't stick, oh well, who really cares? Um, so we're going to start with my number 1 team, and call it bias, call it whatever you want, but I am going to have Ohio State as the number 1. I think they beat Oregon. I mean, they could beat them twice, and that's kind of what I have right now. They beat them once in the regular season, like they will this weekend, and then they beat them in the Big Ten championship, and I think that's why they remain the number 1 team. I know Texas is currently the number 1 team of all college football, but I think with the way the schedule works out and things like that, Ohio State should be the number 1 team. Or I okay, let me rephrase that. Whoever wins this game will be the number 1 team in the country, no matter what. If Ohio State wins, if Oregon wins, whoever wins it will be the number 1 team. And I'm sorry to Texas, but that's just the way it is. And looking at Texas's schedule, this week is a huge week for them. They play Oklahoma the following week. They play Georgia, so they could reclaim that top spot with some dominant victories. And I think if they beat Georgia, this again, my whole thing will switch up here. And it's making me rethink some things. But I digress. Ohio State is my number 1 team. My number 2 team is going to be Texas. I think Texas remains undefeated, regardless who their QB is, if it's Ewers or if it's Manning. It all depends on how they play against Georgia this upcoming week. And then in the SEC championship, I wanted to say Big 12, but I knew that was clearly wrong and didn't make any sense. But regardless, Texas should win out. I mean they do play some good teams, as I mentioned before. Oklahoma, Georgia, they play Vandy now, who's a scary team. Florida, Arkansas, Kentucky, and then they close it out with Texas A&M, and then they'll probably have to play Alabama or Georgia in the SEC championship, and it'll probably be Alabama, who only has that one loss on the season to Vandy, and I think those two teams could rematch, or not rematch, but meet for the first time this season, and I think Texas would get it done to claim the number 2 spot in the SEC, or sorry, in the college football playoff, but I guess the number 1 spot in the SEC as well. Coming in at number 3, and I debated a little bit on if I should put them 2 or if I should put them 3. Just depends on how they close out their schedule. But it's going to be the Miami Hurricanes of the ACC. I think they don't play any really, really tough teams. Yes, I feel like the ACC as a whole is kind of just grouped together, and um, it'll be difficult to see where teams fall and where they land and pick up again. But the way Miami's schedule looks, Louisville, Florida State, Duke, Georgia Tech, Wake Forest, Syracuse, I think they should win out. And then they obviously walk into the ACC championship game, and they would probably play Clemson, or I mean, they could play Pitt even if Pitt defeats Clemson. It all depends on who that second team is going to be. It could be even be SMU at this point, but I'm going to leave Miami at my three. They win the ACC. They remain undefeated for the rest of the season, and they'll host, or they won't host a game, I guess, technically, but they'll host the 6 versus 11 matchup, regardless of who it'll be towards the end of the season. Coming in at number 4, this was a tough decision for me because I didn't know who would technically be in this position towards the end of the season, but I'm gonna roll with the team I've been saying for a while now, and that's gonna be BYU. I think they win out in the Big 12, and then they win the Big 12 championship. I really wanted to put Boise State here, but I just personally feel that Boise State won't have enough competition towards the end of the season that will make a huge difference. And I think they still get in. They are going to be the non-power four, whatever it is, representative. But I think BYU wins out and they beat whoever in the Big 12 championship. It could be Utah, it could be Iowa State, could be even Colorado at this point. Don't count out Colorado. I know uh, the friends and family I have, they are not big fans of Colorado. And I understand. I dig him. I dig it. I mean, Sanders is doing something that Colorado hasn't done in a little while, but it could be a team to watch out for. But for now, give me the BYU Cougars as my number 4 spot and gets a first round bye, which I don't know if anybody going into the season really thought they were going to be that team, but I'm going to count them as that team. Now, this is where things get very, very tricky. I have absolutely no clue where the chips are going to fall towards the end of the season, and this could be completely wrong. Uh, but I just personally think that this is how the voters will do it, and I again could be completely wrong with my assumption. But for number 5, I'm going back to the SEC, and you're like, who in the SEC could even be here? I'm going to go with Georgia. And the reason why I'm going with Georgia is I think both Georgia and Alabama have 2 losses on the season at this point. Georgia losing to Texas and then Alabama losing to Texas in the SEC championship game. But I think since Georgia would have later losses in the season, they get in higher than Alabama. And that's just the way it seems that voters get sometimes. We've seen it in the past with just the 4-team playoff, and a team misses out, or even a team gets snubbed like Florida State last year, and that's neither here nor there. And I'm not going to give my opinion about that, but that's how people feel. But I think Georgia gets in because they lose later, and I know that sounds really selfish and really annoying, but I think that's just the way it goes. And yeah, it sucks, but it's just the way it falls. So I got the Bulldogs at number 5. At number 6, going back to the Big Ten, and another 2-loss team. And again, it might not make a whole lot of sense here, but going with the Oregon Ducks, and I think their 2 losses on the season are both Ohio State. They lose in the game on Saturday, and then they lose in the Big Ten championship. But if you want my honest opinion, and I just did this so it would be easier for me to make a bracket, is that Oregon wins this weekend, and then Ohio State wins the Big Ten championship. So they still get a bye, but get they don't get the win overall over Oregon. They're technically 1 loss on the season, but I think it will be interesting, those two teams. And I'm sorry, I keep looking over here. My computer's over here and it shows like the standings and things like that. But I think Oregon is going to be one of those weird teams that many are going to think they could have a first round bye. Well, I know they technically can't have a first round bye unless they win the Big Ten championship. But I think they'll be higher seed than like a lot of people are predicting. See a lot of people with five, and they could be five. I think they could be a one loss team and they get the five position, or they're a first round bye. It really depends on how they play against Ohio State, how the rest of the season ends out, and how does Penn State do? Because Penn State would even make a conversation for being in that Big Ten championship. But again, they play Ohio State, so all depends. Everything depends on what other teams do, and this will be way easier. Uh, four more games down the line where the teams have played the big teams and they played these huge games, and you don't have to worry about so much besides the championship games. But give me the Ducks at 6, and it could be lower. Honestly, they could be lower. I could have swapped them with somebody else, but give me the Ducks at 6. Coming in at number 7, that was weird. Coming in at 7, going back to the SEC, and again, this doesn't make any sense, but it's going to be the Alabama Crimson Tide. I think once again they have 2 losses, but their loss is going to be more recent compared to the number 5 of Georgia, and they could even switch with Oregon. I don't really know, uh, but I'm gonna put them at 7. Just feels right to me, and they could even come back and win the SEC championship and have a first round bye. I mean, who knows? Not me because I'm not a can't see the future. Can't see it. But if I could, I would be a lot richer. Let's just say that. But Alabama at 7, and again, it's gonna get wonkier the further we go through this. But just please hold on. Please just listen to me. It'll make sense, I promise. Great. Going back to the Big Ten, and I'm going to count this as one of the first teams that I'm not 100% sure on where they should be because initially had them at 11, tossed them out, and put them at number 8. But going back to the Big Ten, it's going to be Penn State. They're going to be a one-loss team, but their only loss is going to be to Ohio State. But then I think they don't make the Big Ten championship. Well, they could, and this would make more sense maybe. But I'm going to have them at the 8th spot. I think it's going to be close. I'm not sure how it's going to be towards the end of the season, but I think the amount of big wins or big losses they have is going to be less than Oregon. So maybe teams don't like them as much. Maybe teams don't view them as a threat, or maybe they should be higher. But give me the Nittany Lions at 8. And again, I told you this is going to be wonky, but I feel pretty confident about my list. And if you don't agree, well, tough. You weren't doing this, so best of luck next time, I guess. I don't know. We're gonna move on to number 9. Going to our number 9 spot, we're going back to the SEC, and I'm sorry that it's Big Ten SEC, Big Ten SEC, but I don't make these rules for college football playoff. I don't. I don't know why you would assume that I do. But we're going back to the SEC, and it's gonna be Ole Miss. And does that make sense? I don't know. They're gonna be a 2-loss team going into it. They're currently number 9, and I think they lose one more game. I think they play Georgia sometime this season. and I think that kind of keeps them where they are, keeps them steady. They don't make the SEC championship, so that could even kick them out towards the end. But leave Ole Miss in, and they're going to be my number 9 team. Coming in at number 10, bring it in, bring it in, as Boise State finally shows up. I think they actually do get up to 10 towards the end of the season. They move up 7 spots. That seems realistic. On the path that they kind of been on towards this season, they've went up 4 spots this last week as they're now the number 17 team in the country. And I think they could move up 7 spots towards the end. They win the Mountain West Championship. And this is, of course, on the trajectory that they are on. Mountain West has some teams. UNLV's there. San Jose State, also in that conference. San Diego State, Wyoming, all undefeated in Mountain West play. It's all going to come down to, can they remain on the path that they're on? And can they continue feeding Genti? Gosh, I mess his name up every time, and I can't figure out how to say it. It's just going to be one of those names I can't pronounce. That's just what it's. Chalk it up as names Tavin can't pronounce. That list is going to get pretty long. I'm starting to realize, but put him up there. But anyway, Boise State going to be my number 10 team, and they will play Alabama as the 7 to 10, and that one, of course, will be in Tuscaloosa. I would love for that one to be on the blue turf in Boise, but I just don't think it's possible that they can get up to number 8, especially with well, I guess they could with the disorganization of these other teams and how the playoffs might be. Give Boise State a home game. You know what? Fine, give it to them. I'm rooting for it. Moving on to our number 11 team, and that's going to be an ACC team. There you go. I switched it up. I switched it up for you. Are you happy? It's going to be Clemson. And again, I think Clemson might go undefeated the rest of the season, and then they lose in the ACC championship game to Miami. So that's 2 losses on the season, and that just feels right. Just makes sense. And I think I could move them down to the 12. I just don't feel right moving them down to the 12 because Notre Dame is there, and I think Clemson is probably better than Notre Dame. Just because Notre Dame isn't anything crazy, but the way things might be, Notre Dame might get in, and nobody wants to see that. So give me Clemson for the sake of all humanity, all of it. And last but not least, the final team, in my opinion, as of when am I recording this? 10-9 at 2:26 p.m. Pacific time is going to be Iowa State. I still think they get in. Again, I think they go undefeated, lose to big BYU in the Big 12 championship, and that's kind of all she wrote there. I think those two teams, they'll probably still be around the same range that they currently are, the 11 and 14 spot. Iowa State at the 11, BYU at the 14. Um, but I just feel like that those two teams are going to be right around that range still. So if Iowa State loses, they don't fall very far because they're an even matched team with BYU. But they could be a team that's interchanged with an Notre Dame, with an LSU. Texas A&M could even sneak their way in there. Utah could even win. There's a lot of teams that could be in this final mix towards the end. But I think teams like LSU will probably be out. Texas A&M will probably be out. Utah would be the one that I could not notch in. And even like Pitt, who's currently 5-0, could be in there for the ACC. It all depends. All depends on what happens and how everything goes. So I'll put the bracket up on the screen here so you can see exactly my thought or where my teams are placed, things like that, and then I'm gonna pick the games here between the two or between 8-9, 5-12, 6-11, and 7-10, and then so on and so forth throughout the rest of the games. Going into our first matchup, the 8-9 matchup, which would be held at Penn State for my bracket as it stands currently. Um, I'm not gonna have Penn State win this game, and I'm sorry to all of our Penn State fans out there, which it might just be one, I'm not 100% sure. But I think Ole Miss, better team, better quarterback, Jackson Dart. I mean, Luke Skywalker, sorry, Anakin Skywalker. Um, can't believe I messed that up. I am actually kind of disappointed in myself. Regardless, I think they would get the win. It just feels right to me. I think that first loss that they had this season is going to kind of boost their not momentum, but confidence in the rest of the season. And I think Penn State, it, the level of talent is just not the same, and that's just the way it is. It feels like always Penn State is just not up to the standards. But give me Ole Miss, and we'll count it 31-10. 31-10 is going to be my score. The 7-10 matchup, Alabama versus Boise State. And this is a time where you have to feel bad for Boise State as they have an incredible season. Just an incredible season. Most likely only having one loss towards the end, and that was to Oregon. And then they have to go play Alabama. That's awful. It sucks. What a Cinderella story it would be for Boise State. And the way Alabama's defense has been currently playing, they might have a good game, and Boise State could beat Alabama just based on the run game alone. But then it all depends on how Alabama's offense works and things like that. Because their offense is so good, and it's ridiculous. But I'm going to give it to Alabama. Not going to give a score prediction because I'm going to save Boise State. And Alabama will now move on to play Texas in technically a rematch of my SEC championship game. So number 2, Texas. Number 7, Alabama. But first, we're going to move on to the 6th versus 11th. The 6-11 matchup could be the most interesting game of all of college football. Just kidding, it won't be. It'll be number 6 Oregon versus number 11 Clemson, and Oregon should win this one. Oregon is just way better. I'm not even a big fan of Cade Klubnik, the quarterback for Clemson. Just don't think he's that good. But I think Oregon should win this one heavily. It should be a heavy win for the Ducks, and they'll move on to play Miami in the 3 versus 6 matchup. I know it's kind of gone wash besides Ole Miss, but sorry, it's just the way it is. The final game of the first round would be number 5 versus number 12, and for me, it would be Georgia versus Iowa State. And again, the levels of competition is just unmatched, as Georgia is just a way better team. I think Iowa State might put up a semi good fight, but I just don't think they're going to have enough power and, things like that. However, I do want to say one thing about Georgia. And right now, a lot of guys are getting arrested. Um, and I think at some point, college football will have to step up. The NCAA will have to step up. And would they not ban, but prohibit them from playing in this type of scenario? I don't know. They could, because eventually you got to think, man, these guys they're doing it to themselves. It's no good for the sport. It's no good for all this stuff. So I don't know. That's just something to ponder upon and think about. I'm sure nothing will happen, but I think eventually, personally, I would like something to happen because it shouldn't be happening. That's the simplest thing, and whatever. You know what? Georgia wins. They move on to play number 4 BYU. We'll keep it here. 4 versus 5 BYU versus Georgia, and again, it's the same scenario with Iowa State. I think Georgia just gets the upper hand on the Cougars, and it's sad because I don't want Georgia to go far because I'm not a big Georgia guy, but I think it's just the way it is, and BYU just won't have enough. So give me the Bulldogs to move on to the college football semifinals. Next, we'll go to number 3 Miami versus number 6 Oregon. And this would be a fun game, depending on how good Miami's defense actually is. But Cam Ward playing here versus Dylan Gabriel, 2 quarterback master classes. Oregon Should be a fun team, or should be a team you don't want to see in the first, second, or even third rounds of the college football playoff. And I've been thinking, and I think Oregon could get the win here, beat Miami. And I know it's going to be difficult as for myself to say that as a Cam Moore fan, but I think it's the sad truth and it's a reality that Miami's going to have to come to. So give me the Ducks, the number 6 team, moving on, and Miami falling. Texas, Alabama, the 2 versus 7 matchup. It's going to be a doozy of a game. Will Alabama be able to bounce back? 2 losses on the season for my scenario. Keep reminding myself it's my scenario, not your scenario, not your brother's scenario, not your sister's scenario, Tavin's scenario. Texas, Bama. Again, I think Texas the better team. Give it to Texas. Texas moves on. They're going to go to the college football semifinals. The spot they were in last season as they lost to Washington. But yeah, Texas, number 2 team, going to play Oregon in the semis. Finally, the last New York 6 game, or the New Year 6, not New York 6, New Year 6 game. I think that's what they're technically going to call it. Not 100% sure, but Ohio State versus Ole Miss. Give me the Buckeyes. Ohio State, I think, at this point, Texas and Ohio State are the 2 best teams. Um, and probably Oregon right after, but it's just the way that the playoff works. So give me Ohio State to be the next team to move on, and they will play Georgia, a matchup that we've seen time and time again. But it's always an instant classic between the 2 teams. Ohio State, Georgia. I mean, every time I see this game on TV, I get nervous as an Ohio State fan. But I love it because it's such good football to watch. And we've seen it with Justin Fields, with CJ Stroud, just those 2 unable to get past the Georgia hump. I feel like this year is a little bit different. I feel like this Ohio State team is very different from years in the past. So I'm going to give it to Ohio State making the national championship game. Will they win it? I don't know. I guess you'll just have to find out and just keep watching. Joke's on you. Texas, Oregon, another game that's going to be awesome to watch if it just happens in this manner. But I'm going to give the upper hand to Texas. I think even right now, the scenarios that they are currently in, down there, Quinn Ewers, their starting quarterback, and playing with Arch Manning, who has been electric. He's been very, very good. But the team is still able to win games huge. They're like, I mean, playing with a backup quarterback is tough. It's difficult. But their defense is still able to rally. Their offense rallies around Arch Manning, and they're able to win good football games. So give me Texas to beat Oregon. It's going to be a close one, I think, but give me the Longhorns, and it'll be Ohio State versus Texas in the national championship game. For the national title, for all the marbles in college football this season, comes down to 2 teams, the number 1 and number 2 team, in my opinion, going into the final stretch. I think it's going to be Texas. I think Texas gets it done. It seems like this year it's their best chance to win the whole thing. And again, I'm an Ohio State fan. It would suck to not have my team win. But I think, as I mentioned before, when talking about Texas versus Oregon, I think they're just a complete team in Ohio State. There's probably a couple holes in their defense, and they're just not able to get the job done. But the rushing game for Ohio State versus the passing game of Texas, it's going to be a 1-2 punch battle, and it's going to go back and forth. And I don't know if my prediction's even correct, and it might change within the next week or even the next 2 weeks. Who knows? I don't, because once again, I can't see the future. But give me the Texas Longhorns to win the national championship versus Ohio State. I'll put the bracket up one more time. The finished and completed graphic. It should be up on your screen now. And yeah, Texas gets it done. That's all I really have to say about all of this. But I want to thank you for watching the video. Please like, comment, and subscribe on the video. Let me know what things I could do next. We're still grinding it out. We're still learning. So let me know what you think down below. Like, comment, share with all your friends. Let me know what I should do next time, and There might be another video this week. Not 100% sure. We'll see how much time I have and all the good stuff. But yeah, my name has been Tavin Carncross. I'll see you guys next time.